Michael, welcome to today's class. For better or worse, the majority of us never forget high school. Maybe we went on our first date, or we were the star of the football team during this time. Our teen memories are full of romantic crushes, moments of embarrassment, and parental pressure. Let's look back on our teenage years and experience them again together. There are 3 things we're going to talk about in today's lesson. First, what is the mind of a teenager like? Second, what are major issues facing teenagers? And third, why do we remember our teenage years so well? People all feel very different during teenage years. To understand our teenage selves better, we need to look at the development that takes place during these years. First, let's take a look at the development of abstract thinking in teens. As teenagers grow, their abstract thinking becomes more developed. They begin to think about gray areas between black and white issues. They'll also change their mind about the gray areas to fit their goals and wishes. For example, in kindergarten, maybe one child will tell the teacher if another child is doing something wrong. In high school, maybe a teen would reconsider doing this because that person is their friend. Or maybe they don't want that person to think badly of them. Teens start considering more factors than they did in childhood. Older teenagers also expand their logic and reasoning abilities. They can have thoughtful discussions about serious topics. Examples of these topics include war, college, the economy, and their visions of what would make the world better. Older teenagers are also more intellectually advanced than children, so adults can have more back-and-forth conversations with them. They're better able to understand the point of view of others. They're also more open to other perspectives and ideas. As intellectual growth develops, so do certain mental abilities. They gain the ability to solve problems, think about their future, and understand the long-term effects of their decisions. However, teens normally use these skills inconsistently. As a result, they sometimes do things without thinking them through first. This is why teenagers might put off doing something meaningful for their future, and instead, they'll do something enjoyable at the present moment. However, many older teens tend to use their new intellectual abilities as logical weapons. These weapons are used against their parents. For example, teens will try to find holes in their parents' logic and challenge them with thought-out reasoning. This is mainly because they are becoming more separate from their parents. Additionally, it is not uncommon for teens to question and challenge school and parental rules. Besides changes in their views, teenagers also try to explore their identity. Teens do many things to try and form an identity. They may listen to new music, try out clothing fashions, and begin to explore new areas of life. Such examples include jobs, religion, political issues, and social causes. While big changes take place in people's minds during the teenage years, their bodies undergo big changes as well. In terms of physical development, teenagers experience rapid and drastic changes in their bodies. Boys are close to completing their physical growth. Teen boys' voices will lower and facial hair will appear. They may continue to gain height and muscle. Many boys like to model their appearance on somebody they admire, like a movie star or simply an older brother. Girls usually reach full physical development in their teenage years. Many teenage girls are overly concerned about how they look. Since teens are very concerned about the opinions of others, they are often unhappy with their body's size, shape, and weight. Some even go to the extreme of starving themselves or going on unhealthy diets. This is all to maintain a certain look. Who did you want to look like when you were a teen? The physical changes in teens are very obvious, but some of the biggest changes in teens happen emotionally and socially. Emotionally, teenagers typically reject physical affection from their parents. Rather, they prefer a lot of physical affection from their friends. This rejection is because the teenager is separating from their parents and wants to feel more independent. Kids typically will draw closer to their parents after they leave home. Once they've experienced actual independence, they discover that their parents are smarter than they originally thought. This means teens don't think their parents know as much about life as they actually do. But when they start living on their own, they realize their parents were right about many things. Because teens start feeling more independent, they may start getting involved in more risky behaviors. These behaviors include drinking alcohol, trying drugs, and having sex. Parents should help their kids avoid these behaviors by talking with them about what they're experiencing. Socially, older teenagers are less influenced by peer pressure. At the beginning stage of forming identity, teenagers are heavily influenced by peer pressure. As teenagers mature, they are less likely to give in. This is because they want to think for themselves and make their own decisions. However, they are greatly influenced by their friends regarding clothing, styles, music, and fads. They are also more likely to seek out advice and help from a friend rather than their parents. For example, maybe a boy is having issues with his girlfriend. Even though his parents have more relationship experience, he will consult his friends for advice. Generally, teens are looking for a group to be accepted by. They want to fit in with a particular group. One man from our course is reminded of his teenage years when he sees two teens enter a coffee house. Let's listen to what he says. It was so clear how uncomfortable some of them were, yet they were pretending to have a good time. A couple of the boys were really awkward around the girls, and two of the girls were wearing too much makeup. I can remember wanting to be popular when I was in high school. Furthermore, a lot of teenagers begin pairing off into couples. Dating becomes more serious. Some teens even develop serious romantic relationships. A man from our course talks about a girl he wanted to have a relationship with when he was a teenager. Let's see what he says. There was one girl I had a crush on, but I thought she was interested in somebody else. I didn't find out until much later that she was interested in me too. Regarding social values, teens typically do not blindly accept an adult's moral values. Instead, they will explore their own. Moreover, they are in need of adult role models. These role models must demonstrate good morals by being trustworthy. They will be concerned if they see an adult's values and the morals promoted by society are not consistent. We have just finished talking about the mind of teenagers. Now, let's discuss some issues concerning them. Of course, a big issue that teens have always faced is bullying. But with the spread of technology and the internet, a certain type of bullying has been on the rise: cyberbullying. Cyberbullying is when someone uses technology to send mean, threatening, or embarrassing messages to or about another person. It is different from regular bullying because it happens 24/7. It's not limited to school. Teens remain connected through social media, so there is no option to just go offline. Let's say a classmate posts a selfie online. Someone else then makes a mean comment about it. Before you know it, the photo has been shared, liked, and reposted. Hundreds or even thousands of people have seen it. That's the danger of cyberbullying. It's public, it spreads quickly, and it's active 24/7. Cyberbullying is not a new phenomenon, but a shocking number of teens are anonymously making mean posts online about themselves. This issue came to researchers' attention after the death of Hannah Smith. She was a 14-year-old girl who hanged herself after months of digitally harassing herself. This behavior is called digital self-harm. According to researchers, victims of cyberbullying are 12 times more likely to cyberbully themselves. There is already a close link between physical self-harm and suicide attempts. Therefore, it's possible that the same connection could exist with digital self-harm. This is alarming because the suicide rate of teenagers has been rising steadily over the past decade. The obvious question is, why on earth would teens do this? A number of teens were asked by researchers why they engaged in digital self-harm. When asked, boys were more likely to say they did it as a joke or to get attention. Girls often said they did it because they were suffering from depression. It's the same reason why someone may physically cause themselves pain. There is also evidence that social media plays an increasing role in mental health issues among teenagers. Speaking of digital issues, there is another one that is perhaps more obvious than cyberbullying: internet addiction. It's well known that many teens are fans of playing video games and using the internet. But what began as an interest in technology, a form of entertainment, or a way to chat with friends may transform into a serious behavior disorder. Teen internet addiction is more than just a strong urge to be online. It is a loss of control over one's ability to regulate or limit their time spent on the internet. Some people continue to regard teen internet addiction as simply a parenting issue. However, many experts consider teen internet addiction as a real issue, deserving further study. Like other addictions, teen internet addiction is more common among teens with disorders such as depression, anxiety, and low self-esteem. For one having difficulty in real-life social situations, the power, sense of community, and excitement of online gaming can be highly attractive. Another contemporary issue regarding teens is the negative effect of violent films and video games. According to various studies, violent films and video games numb the brains of teenagers. Furthermore, repeated viewings make them less sensitive to aggression. This desensitization, as a result, may promote aggressive attitudes and behavior. In one study, researchers used brain scans to determine if teens become less emotionally responsive to violence the more they see it. In this study, teenage boys were asked to watch a series of 60 4-second video clips. At first, the degree of violence and aggression in each scene was low or moderate. There were no extreme scenes. The boys were asked to rate the aggression of each scene compared to the previous one. As they watched, their brains were monitored using MRI scans. As the boys were exposed to more violent videos, the activity in the brain regions connected with emotional reactivity decreased. One area of the brain in particular became increasingly desensitized over time. This area of the brain is involved in emotions and emotional responses. This was noted most after the boys watched the most violent clips. The question, however, of whether this desensitization leads to real-life violence is still up for debate. Another teen issue is currently widespread in China. Academic stress has a harmful impact on teenagers' physical and psychological health. They are enslaved by parents and teachers to take extra classes and do ridiculous amounts of homework. Research proves the harmful effects of academic stress on Chinese teens. Researchers found that 81% of the children worried a lot about exams. 63% of them were afraid of punishment by teachers. Shockingly, 73% were physically punished for lax academic effort by their parents. Over 1/3 of the children were reported suffering from illness caused by anxiety and worry once or more a week. Well, that's enough for issues facing teenagers. Let's now touch on something more personal, our teenage memories. We can see that being a teenager is certainly an eventful time, and the teenage years for most of us are undoubtedly the most memorable. Some of us look back on high school as the best time of our life and long for those good old days. One person from our course shares his view. Now that you mention it, it wasn't a great time, though I had some fun too. Others remember high school with a mixture of emotions: longing, regret, joy, and embarrassment. Another person from our course has a different opinion from the first one. He says, "I guess it wasn't so bad at the time, except when I was preparing for my university entrance examinations. The more I watched them, the more I realized how glad I am that I don't have to go through that stage of life again." So, how vivid are your high school memories? Why do you think the mental snapshots of our high school years remain so vivid? And why does this period of our lives seem to be so meaningful and memorable? First, as teenagers, we were greatly influenced by our hormones and emotions. Strong emotions equals strong memories. This means it is easier for memories to get imprinted on our brain during this period. Researchers have identified something called the reminiscence bump. The reminiscence bump describes older adults having increased recollection of events from when they were younger. This period is between ages 10 and 30. Research shows that our strongest memories come from events during this period. So, what specifically about this time makes it stand out from the rest of our years? One reason is undoubtedly because of changes in the brain's sensitivity to certain kinds of information. Teen years are loaded with important social feedback about one's skills, attractiveness, and status. This information is exactly what we need to pay attention to in order to become socially successful. Looking at prehistory may also explain why so much meaning is attached to teenage years. One example we can look at is why teenagers often strive to be popular. As far as scientists can tell, our prehistoric ancestors lived in relatively small groups. People generally would live their entire life in this group. One's social standing within it was established during adolescence. It was unlikely for a person considered to be a loser at 18 to rise to an important position at 40. From this perspective, the competition of one's teen years had lifelong effects. There is another theory called the social comparison theory. This theory states that humans figure out how good they are by comparing themselves with others. The more similar people are to us, the better we can measure our own strengths and weaknesses. You are the same age as your high school classmates, and you all started out in the same place. The urge to compare ourselves with peers makes teenage years unforgettable. Also, because of this, there's a certain degree of interest in finding out what happened to them later in life. People like to do this to see how their classmates' lives compare to theirs. Let's quickly review what we learned today. First, we discussed the mind and intellect of teenagers. Second, we discussed major issues facing teenagers today. And third, we touched on why we remember our teenage years so well. Do you often think of your high school years? Which memories stand out the most? Do you wish you could turn back time and be in high school? The teenage years are certainly some of the most memorable. They are times of change, learning, and mixed emotions. We cannot turn back the clock to the good old days or erase the memory of getting rejected by our first crush. But we can at least better understand and cope with this special time in our lives.